dream, the realities are coming true. And I think that, while we all think we know what betting is, or I guess, I have a generic understanding of betting, some of us have been learning more in the last year or so. And I think that, you got to know what you know and know what you don't know. And so working with lottery, we wanted to bring experts and have experts talk to our business community about what is sports wagering. And then I think specifically in Washington, D.C., the mayor challenged the cabinet and challenged us with the legislation for sports wagering to do things differently. DC can never be just like everybody else. And I think the experts, and Craig will speak to this a little bit, the experts last week were saying, read the regulations. And I will double down on that. Read the regulations, one, because lottery and DSLWD, we worked really hard on these regulations, but also because regulations are different here than any other city. There's no other city in the country with local participation requirements. And those requirements mean that people that are looking for licenses are required to demonstrate how they're going to work with local businesses. And now this is fantastic, and in a little bit creates a conundrum, because the sports book is a little bit of a close. And Craig, I think last week I called it the hard candy shell in the center, and there are pieces of it that are a bit impenetrable, and will probably remain that way for the protection of both the algorithm and the safety of the wager. And but there are a lot of things around it. So what we want to do is really talk about, how does the industry work? And then how do we make sure that we're getting people ready to engage with the industry in ways? And so when we have experts like Craig and Sarah, Ridgely and I were literally on the phone till late last night, and Ridgely was going through, in his mind, things that lottery does, that, warehousing, data storage, marketing, machine maintenance, trainings, the things that are outside the norm of landscaping, security, construction, things that we are all aware of with CBE spend. And so what we're excited about is having experts that know how this industry that has never been available in Washington, D.C. works. And then talking about, if you're not ready now, what might you need to do to be ready? And then I think if you are an expert that is consulting to somebody that's going to be a Class A or a Class B, and you understand that this legislation is different, how might you be advising them to find ways, not in the center, not in the algorithm, but around those edges, with different types of risk analysis or legal, or maybe they need to find a place where they're going to have their data storage. I was interested to learn that all transactions have to stay within the borders of our city, which means that's a lot of data storage. So if you're a person that owns property and you have a good electrical load and a great AC, you might be a great place to house some servers. So I think these are things that we want experts to be able to share practical advice and demystify the industry that has never been here before. So we are so excited for this, and we will continue having these conversations, because it's going to take a little while to get from here to there for some businesses. And we want to make sure that along the way, as people are applying, we're figuring out where those gaps are and then filling those gaps. And that's the purpose of these series. So thank you so much. I want to thank our partners at Lottery. I want to thank Sarah for their willingness to share this expertise with our businesses. And we look forward to learning a lot today.
Thank you very much, Director Whitfield. Appreciate that very much. And so I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of the UNLV International Center for Gaming Regulation. It's our pleasure to be a part of this program with the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development and the Office of Lottery and Gaming. So this is a topic that we're going to carry on a conversation that we started last week with regards to navigating the sports betting industry and how small businesses can get involved in this industry. And hopefully one of the things that I wanted to key on that Director Whitfield said is, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And we're here to help kind of demystify some of that, because a lot of the ways that you can penetrate the market in sports wagering are very similar to what you would do when penetrating other businesses. Obviously, it's a highly regulated business, so there are differences, but there's also a lot of similarities, and that's what Sarah and I will be discussing with you for the next 45 minutes or so. So I did want to just tell you briefly about the center before we dive right in. If you haven't been familiar with it, I'll make this real brief if some of you attended the program we did. Our center focuses on 4 key areas. The first is to provide research funding and a repository mechanism for gaming and gaming regulation. The second is really educating the gaming industry on regulatory best practices and operational functionality excellence. The other third item that we really focus on is a thought leadership platform. So we really get regulators together from around the world to convene and discuss current issues and what are the best practices and how to regulate those issues. And then the fourth area that we really focus on is just to act as kind of an advisory, a neutral advisory to governments around the world, gaming jurisdictions, and sovereign nations throughout the US to help them focus on regulatory leadership and really coming up with a strong and commercially viable set of regulations for their gaming institutions. So again, it's our pleasure to be here. You know, why are we here today? So Director Whitfield focused a little bit on it, and Sarah and I will be talking about this, but just about 3 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act violated the principles found in the 10th Amendment. So that while it didn't make sports betting implicitly legal in the United States, it did shift that responsibility back to the states. And as Sarah and I are going to dive into this conversation, we've seen an unprecedented expansion of sports wagering in just 3 short years. And so it's really happening very, very quickly. How do we make that expansion available to small businesses? We're going to talk about that. So my special guest today is Sarah Slane. I'll tell you a little bit more about Sarah. She's got many years of experience working in the casino industry. Most recently, besides her own business that she's founded, Slane Advisory, she worked as a senior VP of Public Affairs at the American Gaming Association, key spokesperson and strategist, and really one of the key focal bodies in the sports wagering world that helped drive PASPA to what it basically was no longer valid, and we see the expansion today. And so it's our pleasure to welcome Sarah to the program today. So welcome, Sarah.
Hello, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the slides here so we can see each other and have a conversation here. I wanted to kind of ask you first and foremost to kind of just tell us a little bit more about your journey in sports wagering and kind of how you've come to the place that you are today, and kind of what your business does in the sports wagering world.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks again for allowing me to speak to everyone today about my background in the gaming industry. And you may hear some cicadas in the background because I am in the DC metro area. So I actually live in Maryland, but actually started my career in DC and worked at the American Gaming Association, which was in the district as well. And so very, very familiar with the district and what's happening there. So like I said, I started off actually in government relations, worked in a couple trade associations in the district, worked on Capitol Hill, and then made my way out to Las Vegas and had the privilege of working with MGM Resorts International in their government relations department, and moved back here subsequently in 2012 and ran the statewide referendum, for those of you that are listening in the audience, question 7, to bring a 6th casino to the state of Maryland. And we're fortunate enough then to receive licensure at MGM National Harbor and that beautiful project. I actually drove by it the other day, and it's amazing just to see it, so stunning. And then I moved over to the American Gaming Association, which is the national trade organization that represents the commercial, tribal, and supplier community in the casino industry, and led the sports betting initiative on behalf of the industry. So ran the initiative to support legalization and talk about the reasons why PASPA, which was the federal law that was in place, was failing. And we're obviously fortunate enough then in 2018 to see that law struck down by the Supreme Court. Subsequently, in 2019, I hung my own shingle and now consult to media, sports, and other startups in the space that are looking to navigate and drive business development opportunities back to their organizations with the gaming industry.
Terrific. So it sounds like we've got the right person on board here today. So
I'll try my best. I'm a good example of small business, right?
Absolutely. No, that's terrific. So let's dive into this and kind of just frame this kind of the sports wagering ecosystem first before we dive into more details and kind of just talk about kind of the events of the last 18 months plus. I want to focus on two things. First of all, let's just talk about kind of overall general advancements in the industry. Obviously, we know expansion's happening from a legal and regulatory, but are there any other significant kind of advancements that you see in the sports wagering world that are kind of relevant, especially to small businesses?
Yeah, I think so I like to obviously I take a step back. And I came from the casino gaming industry space, which in the United States has largely been a brick and mortar and retail experience. It wasn't until honestly 2018 when PASPA was struck down that the whole notion of an industry moving from one that has been largely taking place in a retail fashion moving to a digital one. There are not that many industries that are left that had not made that pivot. So that Amazon moment, I guess you could say. And so that really is about what's happening right now to the gaming industry writ large, is that we're largely moving from brick and mortar casino experiences like MGM National Harbor to now a digital mobile platform where you can bet online. And in other states outside the District of Columbia, we're also seeing online poker as well as online casino happening as well. So that's one piece of it. I think what's really interesting that's happening in the district that we started to see a little bit more traction happening around the country is the partnership now with the teams from a retail perspective. I was fortunate enough to attend the William Hill Sportsbook opening at Capital One a couple weeks ago, and it's amazing. It's so great to see it in action. But the notion now of having a retail sportsbook opportunity within an arena, I worked in, like I said, the gaming industry for a long time. I spent a lot of time pushing back on stereotypes and misnomers about the industry and dispelling a lot of myths, which, sometimes were being perpetuated by leagues like the NFL that had wanted nothing to do with gambling, that were perpetuating and pushing forward a lawsuit to basically shut down a legalized sports betting framework, and who are now benefiting from that. So the fact that daylight that existed between the teams, leagues, and media companies to a degree, now there just is none. I mean, the Capital One example, MGM now with the Nationals, I was fortunate enough to work on a couple deals with other teams in Arizona. That whole structure of having an actual physical presence within an arena is a totally new concept, which is amazing.
And why do you think sports wagering has advanced so quickly compared to maybe other forms of gambling? Clearly, you're a sports fan, I'm a sports fan, a lot of the people are on the call are sports fans. So is it simply just that, or is it just, is there some other reason that you've kind of detected that as why this has taken off as opposed to other forms of gaming?
Yeah, I think 100% it's a nomenclature thing. I think that I was privileged to have failed around trying to legalize online gaming. When we would frame it that way and talk about why we needed to have online gaming and why we should be modernizing our industry, that fell completely flat, and we had no success legislatively. Versus now mobilizing and legalizing sports betting onto a digital platform, it just is much more acceptable. I think people feel like I sports bet, my dad sports bets, I do it, it's fun. We do squares around the Super Bowl. Like, it's just much more widely accepted and I think more palatable than talking about online casino. So that I think has been a huge contributor as to why this has moved forward in a much faster fashion than I think anyone imagined it would. I think the other piece of that was that daily fantasy sports, quite frankly, really seeded the ground for legalization. So, prior to PASPA being struck down by the Supreme Court, you had DraftKings and FanDuel that were very active in the space around daily fantasy sports, and a lot of question as to whether or not there was that was legal, and if it was gambling and not gambling and sports betting. So I just think, again, like, legislators sort of, they liked it, they got familiar with it, they started to understand it, and it was much more acceptable than potentially, talking about legalizing online casino.
That makes sense. It's much more prevalent, absolutely. So we have to talk about, the elephant in the room has always been, we always talk about what has happened in the last 18 months, specifically with COVID, and how the shutdown kind of has affected the sports wagering industry. Certainly, jurisdictions have opened up and begun operation during that time. So we know that maybe slowed some things down, but certainly didn't stop anything. But have you, kind of based on your experience and what you've seen in the last 18 months, can talk about maybe how the ecosystem has changed or evolved due to COVID? Any kind of positive things we can take from the effects of the shutdown?
Yeah, I think a couple things happened. I mean, there are very few businesses where you would sit back and say to yourself, like, they're going to shut down sports and they're going to shut down betting on sports, and both happened at the same time. But honestly, I think if you ask the operators during that period, of course, everyone was nervous, like scared to death that, what are we going to do? The bottom's going to fall out. But I think it actually was a breathing moment. Like, operators are going a million miles an hour right now. They were truly building the car as it was speeding down the highway, because you had New Jersey enact legislation as soon as the law permitted it to. We had Pennsylvania. So it was a lot of, like, now we're up to 30 states. The district moved very early as well. So I just think that it's been a lot of, like, flailing, not in a bad way, but just trying to keep up with all the demands and all the new markets that are opening up and all the new regulations and all the new technology. And so COVID gave the operators a minute to take a breather and, like, actually prioritize and look at the technology and look at all the things that they needed to do to be a successful business. I think another piece of this, when I think about product, again, like, I think that it allowed some of the operators then to be able to advance and move new technologies into their platforms that were not there previously. And then I would say, from a third perspective, maybe I'll go to four. A third point on this was, it started to resonate, quite frankly, with legislators that, look, we don't really have a brick and mortar retail opportunity, given now that we have COVID, we're under lockdown. Like, we need to legalize something mobile because people are at home and, they want to be entertained, and this just makes good sense. If you were debating it or contemplating it before, this should accelerate that legalization. So I think that did advance those conversations and legislation into passage. And then the fourth piece was just this new sort of interesting, the operators had to pivot. They had to find something for bettors to bet on. And I think one of the really interesting stories that has emerged is this now huge following about betting on table tennis. And apparently Colorado, there are a bunch of sharps that live there that bet on table tennis very regularly, which is really, really sort of interesting. So again, like, it forced operators to get creative. And, I think, and I'll go to a fifth point, but cash transactions and processing financial transactions, I think it did, again, accelerate that whole piece of it as well. There had been a lot of holdup from accepting payment online for sports betting. And I think that, again, this, like, just pushed the merchants and the banks into a position then to accept online sports betting and wagers from customers.
And as as we see expansion happening, a question that came up from our audience was about comparing the sports betting that's happening in New York and New Orleans and how does it relate to Las Vegas and the DC area. And we're finding that because it is a states issue, everyone's kind of doing things a little bit differently. I mean, there's certainly similarities, but sometimes tribal properties and sovereign nations that are in certain states are getting a leg up on commercial operators. But it's really hard to compare and contrast. It's really not, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, I think that has been something that, quite frankly, anyone that's not familiar with the gaming industry has underestimated. Just that gaming rolls out and has rolled out for decades on a state by state and a tribal basis, a tribal jurisdiction basis. And so the myriad of complexities, regulatory complexities, laws, structures as to like how DC included, like how the rollout's going to happen, who's going to be allowed into the marketplace, what's the tax rate, all of those things that contribute to a business's bottom line are not congruent. And so it can be a really expensive, difficult industry to crack into on a national scale, for sure.
Now I want to talk a little bit about technology and hospitality, because those industries seem to kind of really the cross section into sports wagering. And just if you see anything kind of putting on your future glasses, other than telling us who's going to win the next Super Bowl, we're not going to ask you that, Sarah, but looking at putting on your futuristic glasses, your time machine, and tell us what do you think the role of technology and hospitality might play in the future of sports wagering? Are we going to see some major changes that kind of as we look at kind of predictive curves of technology and sports wagering? Anything major that you kind of see on the horizon in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a modernization around the sports book has stalled. Right. Like, so I remember back in 2015 when I was leading the industry initiative. And again, I had to work with all of the casino operators. If they were the Las Vegas operators like MGM or Caesars, Las Vegas Sands, all the properties I'm sure that some of the people that are sitting on this call have visited before, as well as in tribal interests, which were very different than the Las Vegas casino strip properties versus then the regional casinos like Penn National Gaming. Everyone had a different take on a sports book. Now, of course, Las Vegas had the most familiarity, given that it had been legal there for 20 years. It was an exception to the federal law. So the worry was, did Las Vegas feel like they were in a position of having a monopoly in the state that they did not want to give up with legalization? And what we all figured out and decided was, first of all, those companies now have a footprint throughout the United States. I talked about how I work for MGM. MGM obviously operates, they're the largest operator in the state of Nevada, but they also have MGM in Maryland, and they have one in Springfield, Massachusetts, and they have a property in Mississippi. Everyone's footprint was big enough that they felt like, okay, like we don't, we're not so Nevada centric as companies anymore. The other thing was the illegal market was just so massive. It was humongous to think about all the people that were then not going to Las Vegas or lived in Nevada and had the ability to bet on sports legally. And so we knew that a lot of that activity was happening offshore or through bookies or through illegal websites. So we wanted to be able to recapture that revenue. The other piece that the operators in Nevada struggled with, quite frankly, was they're like, look, this is a very low margin business. About 95% of the wagers that are taken in handle, which everyone sees these big numbers out there, $2 billion being wagered last month. And I think it was close to $1 billion that was wagered last month in New Jersey. That 95% of that is going back to winners. So you break that down even further, then you have to pay taxes, you have to pay employees, you have to pay for marketing. Like, it's a very, very low margin business. And I remember an operator saying to me, Sarah, I hope you understand that sports betting is a rounding error on our balance sheet. Like, it is so not a big deal. And so, of course, then on the investment side, the operators are just not making an investment in it. They're like, it's a great amenity. We love it. It drives people to Vegas. They'll come for the Super Bowl. They'll come for March Madness. They're going to hang out. They're going to stay in hotel rooms. They're going to shop and eat and everything else. Like, we love it. Rising tide lifts all boats. But like, it's not really the tip of the spear. So we struggled with that a bit. Now, clearly, I think this whole, like I said, pivot from retail to mobile is really where the prize is at the end of the day for the operators. And don't get me wrong, like on a global scale and on a national scale, there's going to be money to be made. You're attracting a new customer that, quite frankly, the industry was losing. So there is tremendous upside. And online casino is honestly really where it is at, where they're going to make the most amount of their money. I think that's going to be a longer legalization period. But when I think about hospitality and I think about sports betting, I think that this is the best thing that could have ever happened because there's now fresh new blood, new perspective, different takes on how to build a sports book, how to build one successfully. And I talked about at the beginning what I thought was really interesting, which was now this meshing together of retail sports books and arenas, teams, stadiums, and how that's all going to look and transpire. I mean, the William Hill book at Capital One is beautiful. They've redone it. It's 2 levels. There's access in and out of the arena. You could bet during the game. It's a whole hospitality experience. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing more innovation along those lines and how, again, that integration occurs.
You talked about, we have these large betting venues, such as either a land-based casino or the ones that are being built at the Capitol Arena there. And then we think in terms of what Washington, D.C. has available with the smaller kind of restaurant, tavern type capability. Is there kind of an opportunity cost or an opportunity discussion that can be taking place with kind of comparing those 2 business models and what the future looks like for that smaller type venue in an area like DC where it has both available?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm probably going to be not popular, but I'm going to say this is not going to be the panacea. Like, it's going to help. It definitely will help small business. I don't even want to say that there isn't a downside because I do think I get back to the reality of the business, which is it's a low margin business. Like, it's not, sports betting is not going to, again, be the panacea for a bar and tavern. Do I think it helps? Do I think it's another nice amenity? Of course. Do I think that's the way that honestly the Las Vegas operators have viewed it? Like I said, yes, that was the way that they viewed it. It was not like slot machines are the working horse of the casino industry because the margins are so high. It's a game of chance. People go in there, they have a great time. It's, there's no figuring out a slot machine. It is truly a game of chance with a random number generator. Sports betting is a game of skill. So you're going to have people that are sharps that know how to bet, that know how to lay off bets, that know, when someone's not pricing things the right way. And so I come with a word of caution, which is, do I think it is a nice thing to have? Absolutely. Do I think that there's some ancillary benefits? Sure. Do I think it's going to be a panacea for every small business? I do not.
With BetMGM going live today in the DC area, what do you think, what areas could kind of benefit from that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think their partnership with the Nationals is amazing. The Nationals have done a fabulous job of reinvestment in I think it's it's either Southeast or Southwest. Sometimes I get my DC corridors mixed up, but that whole area is incredible. I love it. I love the concept of a mixed use development and having a sports book in there, and MGM is a premier partner. Of course, I'm a little bit biased because I did work there, but like, they don't mess around. They don't do things poorly. They're going to do it, and they're going to do it really well. And so I think it's great. I think it's great for the district. I think it's great for baseball. I think it's a home run all around. I think that they are going to bring, like I said, when you talked about hospitality and entertainment and the coinciding of all of it. I mean, I think that is like the panacea for what we like to see, which is, again, that daylight is just going away now between sportsbook operators and teams. And I think that trend's going to likely continue.
If we talk kind of specifically about a small business trying to get into this sports wagering ecosystem, one of the the things that always comes up is this is a new opportunity, and we see those dollar numbers thrown around quite a bit, and then you've kind of demystified some of those dollar numbers. What kind of advice would you give to a small business as far as how they can participate in this sports wagering ecosystem that we see out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's on the table right now is probably a partnership with someone, and you would, as a small business, you would get some sort of revenue share. Like, my advice would be, I would not do a massive capital investment. I think that whoever comes to you that has the expertise in sports betting, you should rely on them for doing the heavy lifting of managing money and managing IT and going through the regulatory process. It's expensive. It's expensive. It's, like I said, margins are low. The reasons why, like, these bigger operators can do it is they have big balance sheets and they have a big footprint throughout the United States, and they can buy things on bulk and they can do things at a much bigger level. I mean, I know Intralot is the lottery's partner, and is, managing their website and their digital website. I know that they do roll out some lottery-based products as well to the bars and taverns. And I know there are going to be other operators out there that I'm sure are talking to other small businesses throughout the district. And again, I would just say, I would definitely align yourself with expertise in the area. I would definitely look for a reputable operator that knows what they're doing, that is not going to put a small business in any risky position, because this is a highly regulated industry. There certainly is downside. There's a lot of cash, transactions that are happening. There are a lot of regulatory requirements, there are a lot of reporting requirements. So I would say tread lightly. I would talk to as many operators as you possibly can, and I try to find the best deal for you and then find the best partnership for you. But I guess my advice is, I'd be very careful about going at it alone. I understand the Class B licenses are out there. But I think it's a complicated business, that there are very sophisticated people who are looking for openings and opportunities, certainly when it comes to pricing lines.
And really, if we look at even on some of the ancillary opportunities to be involved in the sports betting industry, whether it's on the sportsbook side or just some part of that ecosystem, it really is, kind of like yourself when you hung up your own sign, is that you're really kind of tackling it as a small business would anything. You're looking at kind of the state of your industry and where your current sales are going to come from. You're looking at ROI, the kind of a competitive analysis. You really have to go about breaking into the sports industry or sports wagering industry, just like you would any other small business or any other industry. I mean, the principles are the same, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. And look, I don't mean to be such a Debbie Downer on the opportunity. I mean, I'm fortunate I made something happen from it. And again, like, I guess I'm coming at it very, like, bar and tavern perspective. And there are so many other opportunities, like what I was able to create for myself as a small business person and owner. And I think, again, there are services that are going to be needed. And that's what I actually loved. We did, when I was at the American Gaming Association, we did a research study about the casino industry, and we we're dispelling a lot of myths and perceptions. And one of the reports that we conducted were the job classifications within the industry, because I think that there is a big misnomer that the only, opportunities in a casino are a cocktail server and a dealer. And, when we had actually swept the industry and looked at all the different job classifications, there were over 500 different job classifications. And of course, they go into, back office services like HR and finance and accounting and you name it. But then there's a lot of really interesting sort of niche professions that come out of this industry, because it is so hospitality focused and based. And I love the one at, Bellagio, like a lot of them have horticultural specialists because they have such beautiful displays. And obviously retail is a huge component of that. Food and beverage is a huge component of that. So I think that there are going to be interesting things that come out of the shift now from the pivot from the casino industry, which again has been largely regulated or largely taking place at the brick and mortar level to now the digital. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot more jobs that I'm not thinking about that will come up as a result.
And there's a lot of things that a lot of these land-based casinos and even the mobile operators don't necessarily handle themselves. They're going to outsource some of these things, and that's an opportunity for small businesses to take advantage of. And I know that we had the William Hill representatives a few weeks ago, and one of the things that they were outsourcing was some surveillance, and that was happening, some of the enforcement and surveillance roles. Are there any other roles that you can think of? Obviously, technology a lot of times is outsourced, but what types of things do you think could be outsourced from a sports betting establishment that could be an opportunity for a small business?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great. It was super smart to have William Hill. I actually saw them and they said they had done this, and they can speak at such a local level, which is wonderful. And I know that I think they curated from even on F&B, they curated someone that was local, and that's what we should be doing, right? Again, when I worked with MGM and we were National Harbor, that was exactly what we were doing. We were looking for local talent and local distributors and employees, and so I don't know how much will be outsourced within the district on the mobile piece, but certainly when it comes back to the retail component of this at the stadiums, again, William Hill is just a great example of that, of all those sort of niche things that they need, from security to food and beverage to legal services as well.
And if we talk about then and shift a little bit more to kind of what the marketplace is going to dictate, Sarah. So, obviously there's now multiple sports books in DC. DC is not a massive geographical area. So, what do we think about how competition plays into opportunity? Is the marketplace going to kind of dictate how successful these books are, and if it's going to drive more people to do them? How do you think that's going to play out in the DC area?
Yeah, look, I think, I'll come at this from a very high level, as unbiased as I possibly can, because I've just been around for a long time and I've seen different state rollouts and I've seen success and I've seen failure. And I think, again, it gets back to the objective. And when a government is coming at how they're going to set up their sports betting program, what is the objective? Is it to shut down the illegal market? Is it to drive the most revenue back to the state or the jurisdiction? Is it to create bajillions of jobs? Like, what is your objective? And I think that policy frameworks have to be built around those objectives. What I have seen that has borne the most fruit in other jurisdictions is favorable tax rates that allow the operators to compete with the illegal market that's not paying taxes, that's not, who knows what, if they're employing people or they're paying people, who knows, extending credit across the board. I mean, there's just no oversight. So they have to compete. And in order to compete, they cannot have a bunch of rules and regulations that tie their hands in a way that's, I'm always going to advocate for consumer safety, of course, and that's, what the legitimate legal industry is going to do. But if we have all sorts of laws and rules and regs in place that doesn't allow them to compete, you're never going to shut down the illegal market. And you certainly aren't going to move people that are betting on the illegal websites to the legal regulated ones. I think there's been a lot of discussion in DC around the lottery and monopoly and, not having the websites available throughout the district. And I mean, I don't know the right number. I think that is always the bajillion-dollar question that sits out there. What's the right number? How many people should be allowed in the state? What's the market access, look like? And every jurisdiction has a different makeup. And a lot of it ties back to the home team and who's invested in the state and who's invested in the district. So I am sensitive to the reality of those situations. I think that it is tough to have one operator. I don't know if that's me or you, Craig. You froze maybe. Hopefully it wasn't me.
I'm back
I
on.
went from cicadas to rain now. So I found
It's
my
one of those
voice is
days.
like starting to come down a little bit because the cicadas were so loud. They're kind of, it's going back up again because it's raining. But um, all in all, that's to say that, look, I understand the political nature in investing back in your stakeholders in your jurisdiction in your state. I also think that there's a practical reality in driving revenue and shutting down the illegal market and the models that support that.
And if we talk about, the comparison to that larger, the William Hill arena style sports book, and that the smaller tavern restaurant type of sports book, clearly it's going to be more of a challenge for that smaller tavern to be successful. But are there any kind of we touched on it a little bit, but any other big red flags that you would look at that would say, okay, what does a smaller type of sports betting operation need to be careful of compared to what a larger operator needs to be concerned about?
Managing risk across the board. Like I just, again, it's a tough business. Like I don't want to, sugarcoat that. Like again, it's not going to be a panacea. It's not going to, it will drive some revenue back. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that's a nice added benefit. And I certainly get it. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that you have a mobile platform in DC, so it's not like it's just limited to a retail experience, which would drive more, I think, people going into retail locations than to bet. But if they have the option of mobile, and if you look at New Jersey, where 90% of the bets are taking place online and 10% are happening in a retail location, that just is a good indication as to where the consumer demand is going to go. So I would just say I would manage risk as best I can. And again, like I would just look at how much output is going to end up resulting in input back to my company. And I would just advise and being very careful around those projections.
And really, it's almost, it really is a small business needs to look at anything in the sports wagering kind of ecosystem as it's another customer subset. You're not necessarily going to go all in. It's like, that's going to be my main customer that I'm going to sell to. This is going to be an ancillary, an additional customer that you're going to provide some kind of a service to. So certainly you just want to really, these kind of small businesses, kind of like yourself, is you need to be able to diversify and really be adaptable to what the market demands.
That's true. That's a good point. It's a good point. And I respect that. And I agree with you. And I think, again, this is why sports betting has been really good for the casino industry. It was an industry that was starting to skew, at least on the gaming side, to a much older population. And we weren't seeing kind of recapturing of a younger demographic. And so you're right, like sports betting can bring in a new type of customer potentially.
And so I know we're just about at the end of our time. We've got a few more minutes. So I want to kind of just kind of wind this down a little bit, Sarah, with asking, one of the keys that we've seen, especially in the last 18 months, has been the adaptability, the ability to pivot. And we've seen sports betting do that. Small businesses obviously need to do that too. So, any advice you can give to a small business on maybe how important it is to adapt and pivot and really adjust your business, be able to really not only scale your business, but have it be adaptable as well. Any kind of general advice in that area?
I don't know. I mean, I struggle with that. It's hard.
It's tough. I know. I
Business
want
is
to throw you a
hard. Like,
curveball.
there's not a real direct roadmap.
I'm not giving you fastballs, Sarah. I'm throwing some
No,
breaking pitches your
no,
way here.
thanks. Look, it's a live and learn kind of opportunity and experience. I mean, I think that I've been super fortunate to be in an area right now where there's a ton of demand and a ton of thirst for knowledge and expertise. So I've been very, very, very lucky. I think what I've learned and what has fleshed itself out through my experience is where the most ROI is and what my value is, right? Like what is my value? And you don't really know that until you get out. You get out there and you start, hustling for business, I guess. And so that comes through, I think, experience and time. And then I think, pivoting is important when you're starting to see trends and where should you be and where should you be placing your time and where should you be placing your energy. And again, I just feel like that comes through a lot of living and learning and getting out there and experiencing. And again, there's just I wish I had the sage advice, but I don't, other than experience is really where it is and adapting. And, at some point this market will mature. We're not there yet, but it will mature. And I'm sure, that will require some other reinvention, not just of myself, but other small businesses that are out there right now in the space.
No, I think a great takeaway from what you just said, which I think is a really important nugget, is you really need to understand your value. I think that's hugely important, especially for small businesses where there's always this sense of price that seems to be the important discussion, but really understanding the value you bring. So I think that's a great nugget of wisdom there. Maybe you didn't think it was, but I sure thought it was. It's a great point. So I think that's really important for small businesses to realize that they've got to determine what their worth is and value that they bring, and with quality products and service and things like that. So great point. We did have one question that came up kind of as a general, and I know that you're not necessarily an expert in technology, as I'm not either, but some questions kind of came up with regards to, because so much mobile betting is happening. So talking about, broadband network services relating to sportsbook, is this an area that clearly, especially in the realm of in-game betting, where there's so much happening within the game between plays, is this going to be a 3-point shot or a 2-point shot that Steph Curry takes on the Warriors? There's clearly kind of a trend to improve the infrastructure surrounding kind of network capabilities, Wi-Fi, broadband, things like that. Anything that you've kind of experienced or heard through the sports betting grapevine on, hey, this is a major issue. We clearly need to improve this ability if we're going to be able to improve user experience when it comes to mobile betting.
Yeah, so I work with a company called Simple Bet that is integrated with Interlot in DC, which is wonderful, which is that in-play proposition betting that's happening. And they've made it work, which is great. But yes, do I think generally, largely speaking, taking a step back, absolutely. Like there's so many pieces that have to come together in order for something that complicated to work. I think luckily we are moving to 5G for the most part, pivoting into higher speed internet. So that's good. But yeah, look, I think even latency issues with how like feeds are getting into mobile phones and how when a play is happening, like that's right. Like you can't have any fraction of time or error, because if you do, you're going to lose money. So that's going to have to get more and more sophisticated, and I imagine that it will.
And certainly technology is always going to be changing and improving. So that's an area that, especially of a small business, is in that realm. That's always, not just in the sports betting world, but in every world, technology is king nowadays. So awesome. All right. Well, terrific. Thank you so much, Sarah. We want to just, I know we're running right about at the end of the session, but just want to know if there's any additional questions that might come through that can be forwarded to Sarah or myself. We're happy to tackle those in the last minute or few minutes that we've got here. I mean, the $1 million question, Sarah, and you've kind of touched on it already, is this market worth entering for a small business? And I think the answer we've kind of come across is yes, if it's kind of another customer choice, another ancillary customer choice, going all in on just sports betting as a potential customer base could be risky. Any final thoughts on kind of the value of a small business diving into the sports betting world?
No, I feel like I've covered it as best I can.
I think you have.
I wish I had more like sage advice other than to say, do your homework, be realistic, talk to other people that have done this, that have, partnered with either operators or have, operated sports books, and understand their experiences. Go visit Capital One, go visit MGM's sportsbook, see what it looks like and how that all operates, and go from there. And I would just say, just make sure you do your homework.
Yeah, the more you know, as Director Whitfield said earlier, the more that you know, the better off you're going to be in being able to penetrate this business and to really make some inroads in it. So we appreciate that. Any final questions from our attendees? Again, you're welcome to use the chat before we sign off here in just a moment. You're getting some props, Sarah, in the chat, so thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it very much. It's a complex topic, of course, and it's not one that's easy to talk about because it is so complex and there's so many different ways and approaches to this business.
Yeah.
We do have one question that came up about what do we think the needs are of a sports book, which is kind of interesting, because again, it might depend on where the sports book at, but this could be needs from, I guess we could almost say technology needs. There's obviously staffing model needs. I don't know if that person can maybe reiterate it, or Sarah, go ahead if you had something to, but
Yeah,
that's kind of the question.
I want to be sensitive to a sort of opportunity, and what does it present then to people that live in the district or are interested in working it, or being a vendor to a sportsbook operator. I think, I think on the technology side, I don't know that I would necessarily even view it through the lens of just the district, but I think generally speaking, first of all, this is an area that is so rich with talent, and so rich with education and people that work in IT or technology or have all sorts of government clearance and everything else. So it just presents, I would actually take a step back to say that I think the legalization of sports betting may present a bigger opportunity to people that live and work in DC, broadly speaking. So yes, there might be something more locally based, but what I love about, again, and I talk about, just this pivot from what was largely a retail opportunity now into a digital one, is that we've attracted so much new talent into the space, that people that had zero interest in getting into casino gaming that are now interested in sports betting and in working in these tech companies. So I think that is another amazing opportunity for the district.
Awesome, thank you. Any last questions here before we sign off for the afternoon? We're happy to answer any other final questions.
Does someone named Tony have their hand up? Am I just seeing that? Maybe it's just me.
Tony might have a question. If you have a question, Tony, go ahead and use the chat there. We're happy to answer it. I want
to thank you guys. Yes, just real quick. Just want to thank you, Craig and Sarah, so much for this. I thought it was quite informative. Appreciated your honesty, Sarah, and just kind of, all your knowledge and kind of laying out the facts about what sports betting really is. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Sorry, I really appreciate it.
So I think I just want to, it looks like there's no additional questions. So on behalf of UNLV International Center for Gaming Regulation, Sarah Slane, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. We really appreciate it. Great to engage with you, and thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Appreciate it. Also want to thank the Washington, D.C. Department of Small and Local Business Development and the Washington, D.C. Office of Lottery and Gaming as well. So it's been a pleasure to be with you today. Two final announcements, for the attendees. There is a program survey that's associated with our discussion today. It can be found on that initial login page or in subsequent email that will be sent out. So please fill out that survey regarding the program. And again, mark your calendars for June 23rd. There's another upcoming Betting on Small Business Power Hour. So that's going to be available on June 23rd. So please keep that in mind. Mark your calendars. That'll be available on the website as well. Lauren, if there's no additional questions, I think we are ready to conclude the program. And Lauren and Bert, no additional questions. So on behalf again of the International Center for Gaming Regulation, Sarah Slane, thank you very much. And we hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.